Hey, hi, happy Sunday. Welcome joining into Tomato Cube MakeCode Arcade learning session. Today is chapter 4. We are going to learn about the button control as well as how the motion works. And now if you recall, in chapter 1 we learned about MakeCode Arcade in general, and then in chapter 2 we learned about how to create the characters in your game or the sprites, and then in chapter 3 we learned how to create a background or the scene. So at the end of today's session, we are going to combine all this knowledge that we learned, including those that we learned today, to create a simple platformer game. Alright, so let's get started for today's session. Here's the agenda for today. First, we will learn how to perform the button control in the MakeCode Arcade. And then we will talk about the motion or the movement for the objects in MakeCode Arcade. And then we will learn how to create a front view scene. And if you remember, this is a continuation from last week. Last week we learned how to create a top-down view scene. So this week we will learn how to create the front view scene. And at the end of the session, we will combine all the knowledge that we have learned to create a platformer game. Alright, so first thing we are going to learn today is button control. So let's go back to the MakeCode Arcade. So on the workspace, I have one block here that it's creating a sprite called Hero that looks like this, which is a 𝐂𝐻 player, and it's showing on my simulator as well. So for button, if you try to move around the directional button, nothing has happened. In our previous chapter, we learned that in order to move your sprites with the directional button, we can go to the controller drawer and then drag this move my sprite with buttons block into the on start. And then remember to change my sprite to hero. Alright, so if I click again, now I can control my sprites using the directional up, down, left, right button. Okay, so this is a simple technique that we have learned in the previous chapters. So in order to create other buttons, like for instance button A, you can see that as I click on it, nothing happened. Okay, so we need to tell the computer to do something about these two buttons over here. So what do we do is anything related to button is under the controller drawer. So go to the controller and you can see that there's one block that says on A button press. So this means that I want to tell the computer when I press on the button A, let's do something. Okay, so do you find that this on buttons that with these shapes and started with on looks familiar to you? We use on block a lot in previous chapters. So before we talk about how to use this button, let me do a quick recap. Let me go back to the slides. Okay, so do you recognize this on block? So in the chapter 2 sprite, we uses the on block when we want to tell the computer to do something. So in this example, you as a programmer, you're telling the computer that, hey, when player touches the parents, say, I love you. Right, so this is the use of the on block. And then another example we have done in previous chapter is Chapter 3, during the scene, we actually tell the computer, hey, when player touches the finish line, set the game as win. So we use the same technique by using the on block again to tell the computer to do something whenever you need to say, when something happened, perform this action. So on is like when. So when something happened, in this case is when the sprite of 𝐂𝐻 player touches the finish line, then perform this action that you have inside the block. Okay, so similarly for the button control, the button control is, we use the on block because we want to tell the computer, hey, when I press button A, perform something. So right now the something is empty. So on A button press, there's nothing going on inside the block. So we are going to put something in there. So going back to the MakeCode. So we're going to use this on block to tell the computer when button A is pressed, do something. So we're going to drag it out here. Okay, so let's do some simple action. On A button press, what do we want to do? Let's say we want to set the score, increase the score by 1 whenever the button A is pressed. So let me drag the change score by 1 from info drawer. And let me set the score to 0 first. Okay, so that way you can see that the score set is 0. So the score is 0. And when A button is pressed, change score by 1. Okay, so press again, it becomes 2. Press again, it becomes 3. So if you keep pressing, your score keep going up. Okay, so if you press other stuff, nothing happens. You can still control your sprite, but B button doesn't do anything. So how about we do something with the button B as well? So let's duplicate this on block and drag it down somewhere here. Let's change on A button to B button. Okay, so now I can control B as well. So on B button press, change, let's reduce the score for this one. So if button B is pressed, I'm gonna reduce the score by 1. So A increase the score, and now if I press on B, it will reduce the score. Alright, so there are many other buttons that you can control as well. So if I click on the drop down blocks once again, you can see we have A, B, left, up, right, down, menu, any buttons. So you can do something, a lot of other things as well. So let me duplicate another one. How about this time if I press down button and then let me just reset the score to 0. So to reset the score to 0, I just set the score to 0 like this. Okay, so on A button press, increase score. B button press, become negative. Right, and then if I press down, the score becomes 0. And of course, at the same time, it's also, other than resetting my score from 9 to 0, it also moved the sprites. Okay, because I still have this block inside here and says that I would like to move my hero with the buttons, with the directional buttons. Okay, so which is why I can still move the sprite, and at the same time, because I have this event block on block here, that actually says that whenever the down button is pressed, set the score to 0. Okay, so the down button now performs 2 things. Okay, if you click on this press, you notice that other than press, the button events that is responding to you, you can also control other things like release and repeat. So press is, when I press on it, the score is increased. So if I change press to release, so let's see what happened. Okay, if I press on it, the score wouldn't increase. It will only increase when I let go my button. Okay, I'm gonna do that one more time with the press. So let me show you how it looks like first before we change it to release. Okay, so now score is 0, and as you can see, when I click on my A and I didn't let it go, my score increased right away the moment I press on it. It become 1. Right, the moment I press on it, it will become 2. The moment I press on it, it becomes 3. I'm still holding my my button. I didn't let it go. And then I press again without releasing it, it becomes 4. Okay, so whenever the button is pressed, immediately it changes score by 1. But if I change the press to release, okay, you can see that difference. When it is released, even if I press on it, nothing happened. The score is still 0. It will only increase it the moment I release the button. Okay, I'm going to do that one more time. Press, nothing happened. The moment I release, it becomes 2. Okay, so these are the different type of event or actions that you do with the button, and then it will react accordingly. We have press, we have release, and then another one is repeat. Repeat means holding down the button. So let's see what happened. So if I press on it and if I don't let go, it will keep increasing the score, right? Because it detects that your button A is being held down. Okay, so if on A button repeat, it will keep changing the score by 1. So this is similar to when you try to fire shoot a fire in your game and you want it to continue and repeat the fire. So this is what you can do. You can just say that, hey, on A button repeat, then keep firing. So this is what we do in the button control. Later on, we are going to learn how to combine all these button controls to add more interaction into our game. So going back to our slides, we are going to learn motion. It means we are going to learn how to create movement in our games, or how do we make the objects in our game to move. So whenever it involves movement, there's always physics behind it. It's like, what is the reason that an object moves? What is the speed? What is the direction that the object is moving? So all this knowledge is related to physics. So we need to learn it to control how we want to move our objects in the game. Okay, the first thing, do you still remember how to identify the position of your sprite in the screen? We learned about XY coordinate in chapter 2. So do you remember what is XY coordinate? So XY coordinate consists of these two lines. The red color horizontal line is called x-axis, and then the blue one, vertical line, is called y-axis. X-axis starting from the left side is 0. As it moves towards to the right, the number gets bigger. So for our arcade screen, the rightmost over here, X is 160. And then as we move from top to down, it started from 0 and all the way down to the bottom is 120. So to know the locations or the position of this little dinosaur on the screen, we utilize XY coordinates. So we draw a line up and using this as a reference, that we know that the position for the sprite is at X equals to 40. And then as we draw another line to the y-axis, the y is equal to 60. Okay, so now my dinosaur moved to the right side now at this location. So what is the new location for my dinosaur? So the x and y value is x equals 100 and y is 60. Okay, let's try another one. So now my dinosaur moved downwards, so it's a new location. So what is the new position of this dinosaur on the screen? Same thing, x is 100, it moved downwards, so x doesn't change. And y change, y is now equals to 100. Okay, and another example. So the dinosaur moved to the right side, so as it moved to the right, x become 140. But y is still 100. Okay, so this is the x and y coordinate that we learned during chapter 2 to identify the position of the sprites. So that is related to motion, because motion basically means it's a movement of an object. In other words, it's a change of the position of the object. So as your objects move from one position to another, the x and y coordinates of that object change. So to learn motion, it involves two basic attributes. One is velocity, another one is acceleration. So what is a velocity? Velocity is defined as the speed of something in a particular direction. It is a speed, so it's used to measure how fast something moves in a certain direction. It's just like the car that your parents drive. And the speedometer that shows on the dashboard is the one that's telling you what is the speed of the car. So in this case, it's 80 km per hour. So that 80 km per hour or 80 miles per hour is velocity. So if your parents are driving at a constant speed at 80 km, then the velocity is constant. It doesn't change. It stays as 80 km per hour. So we use velocity to measure how fast an object moves in a certain direction. So in this case, the car is moving forward, and of course it can also reverse. It can also move backwards. Right? So the directions matters. So you have to tell the car, hey, is it moving forward? Is it moving backward? And what is the speed? So how do we create movement in MakeCode Arcades? So going back to our arcades. So over here, I have a sprite objects. hero, and I drag in the button control, move hero with buttons, okay? And down here I have on game updates. You don't have to worry about this block of code yet. We will cover that in the later chapters. The purpose of this block is to help me to show or display the X and Y coordinates of this hero sprites. So as I move my button, my hero is telling me that the current X and Y position, the X is 74 and the Y is 60. So if you remember the two lines, the X-axis is the red color line at the horizontal bar here, and then the Y-axis, the Y value is the blue line. So as I move to the left side, my X value change, because X is 0, starting from here is 0. As I move to, let me move all the way to the left side. Okay, as I move out of the screen, it becomes negative. So if I move a little bit more to the right, you can see that the X value keeps changing, but my Y value doesn't change. Okay, as you move all the way to the right side, it will be 160, 157, close to that, and then when I move beyond the screen, it becomes 166. So the first value that you see here is X value, and the second value is Y value. So Y value hasn't been changing because I'm only moving left and right. Okay, so if I move up, now my Y value changes. Y becomes smaller because I'm moving upward to the top, and as center of the hero touches the edge of the screen, it becomes 0. And as I move downwards, the Y value becomes bigger. So at the bottom of the screen, Y value is 120. Okay, so that is the X and Y coordinates that we learned previously, and you can see that as I move diagonally, both my value changes as well. If I only move up and down, only Y value is changing. Okay, and if I move left and right, only the X value is changing. Okay, so going back to my previous questions, how do we create movement automatically in the game? How do we let it move by itself? So we use velocity, because velocity is a speed, is a movement of an object at a certain rate. So to make your objects to move, we can actually set the velocity of the object. So let me drag this set block. I'm gonna say set my sprite change to set hero, and instead of setting the X to 0, I'm gonna change it to velocity to 0. 0 means it doesn't move. This is like your car. If your car is 0 kilometer per hour, the car is not moving. Okay, so if I increase that to, let's say 10, let's see what happened. You can see that my X value is changing. It's keep increasing by 10 pixels per second. Okay, at the end, it will move out of the screen. Okay, as you can see, my sprite is moving to the right because I set it to speed equals to 10. If I change the 10 to negative, it will move backwards to the left side. Okay, because it's saying minus 10, so it's asking the sprite to move minus 10 pixels per second. So it's moving to the left. Alright, and of course, if I change minus 10 to something even bigger, let's say minus 30, it will go to the left in a faster speed. Okay, so this is X. So if I change the X to Y instead, let me duplicate this one and leave the first one as X, and let me leave the first one as velocity X and set it to 0 so that my sprite doesn't move in the X-axis but only move with velocity Y. And because I say negative 30, so it's actually moved upward. So if I change it to positive value 5, so now my X value doesn't change because velocity X is 0, but velocity for Y is changing by 5. It's adding 5. It's going at 5 pixels per second, so it's keep going downwards. And if I change it to negative 5, it will go upward. Alright, so that's velocity. It's to help you to move the object by itself at a speed that you set in the velocity here. So we can set Vx or Vy. Vx means velocity x, which is the left and right direction, and Vy means it's the up and down directions. And of course, if you want it to move diagonally, then you can change both value to, instead of 0, let me just change it to positive phi, and also velocity to phi. Can you guess which direction does it go? Okay, x increasing, y increasing, so it's going downwards and to the right, so it's diagonally towards to the bottom right. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to move to top right, how do we do that? So y is no longer positive values. I'm going to change it to negative, so that the blue line, it will move upwards and the x is moving that way, so it becomes moving to top right. Okay, and then if you wanted to move it down to bottom left this direction, moving to bottom left meaning changing from right to left, so the x will need to be negative. Okay, instead of top, you're moving bottom, which is moving downwards. Y is increasing, so y need to be positive. So x negative, y, velocity y positive, so that will move the sprite to the bottom left. Okay, you can try it out with the velocity in different values, so they can get a feel on how the objects move based on the velocity that you set. Okay, so now we know that velocity is the speed of an object that moves in a certain direction. So we use MakeCode Arcade earlier on to control the movement in our game. We can move it from left to right, right to left. We can also move the object from top to bottom, bottom to the top, and we can also move it diagonally, either to the bottom right or bottom left, or top right or top left. Okay, so all this movement can be controlled by using the Vx and Vy. So x is control left and right, y is control top and bottom. The next thing we are going to learn is called acceleration. Acceleration is the change of the velocity, or how fast the speed change. So we can use acceleration to increase the speed or to reduce the speed. It's similar to you driving a car, and if you press on the pedal, you are increasing the speed of the car. So if you look at the speedometer again, it will move from 60 km per hour, 70, 80, 90 as you press on the pedal, because your speed is increasing or your velocity is increasing. So acceleration is to measure how fast the speed has changed. So the faster the acceleration value is, means the faster your speed increase. Let's switch over to MakeCode Arcade to see how acceleration works in action. Alright, on my MakeCode Arcade, I have a hero that's in red color, and I have set the velocity x to 10 and velocity y to 0. So meaning my red color hero will move along the x-axis to the right direction, because the Vx is in a positive value. Okay, it will not move up and down because our velocity y is set to 0. So our red color hero is moving at a constant speed at 10 pixels per second to the right. So now I'm going to add in another set of blocks. These blocks will create a second hero, which is in blue color, and this hero will have an acceleration x set to 10. So the red hero is having a velocity x 10, and the blue hero will have an acceleration x equals to 10. So let me refresh one more time. Can you see the difference? Okay, so the red color hero is moving at a constant speed at 10 pixels per second. It doesn't speed up, it doesn't slow down, it's at a constant speed. But the blue hero is actually shooting up really fast. It's actually speeding up. So the speed keeps speeding up until he hit the wall over here. Okay, and now the red hero is still moving at a constant speed. Okay, so that's the difference between velocity and acceleration. Acceleration is the changes of the speed. So when it's set to 10, meaning that the blue color hero is increasing the velocity at 10. And if I keep increasing that to a bigger number, let's say 100, okay, you can see that it will move even faster. Okay, and if I change the acceleration x to a negative value instead of positive, you can see that. Let me just change the position of my hero to be somewhere on the right side. Okay, you can see that now my hero is actually moving from right to left because the acceleration x value is setting to a negative value. Okay, so acceleration is how fast you increase and how much you slow down. Then the y-axis is the one that will change it from moving from top to bottom or bottom to top. So if I change the accelerations, let me set the ax to 0 first. And I'm gonna change your acceleration y to, let's say, 100. Let me refresh that. So you can see that my hero is moving downwards. Let me remove the hero, red color hero, and just leave the blue one on my screen. Okay, so now if I change the acceleration to something really big, we can utilize acceleration to help us to mimic certain effect that we want in the game. In this case, you can see that as I increase the speed to 200, it's actually helping us to create a feeling that is having a gravity that is pulling the hero downwards. Okay, so that is when your acceleration y is set to a positive value. So now if I change the value to a negative value, you will get a feeling that, hey, my hero is floating upwards instead. Okay, so if I change back to positive value, that's how you can get the feeling that your hero is having a gravity pull down to the ground. So now let's say if I want to create another effect like a rocket is being shot up to the sky, we can use the same acceleration technique. So let me create another sprite that's a rocket sprite, and let me set the position of this rocket sprite to be somewhere on the ground over here. So I'm gonna say somewhere around here. Oh, it's rocket, not hero. So let me set rocket position to x32, y107. Okay, so now rocket is here. So, and let us combine what we learned with the button control. So let's say I want to launch this rocket, and I will only want to launch it when I press on button A. So in order to do that, I can drag in the on A button press. Okay, so when A button is pressed, I want to set the acceleration for my rocket to be negative y, so that it will have an effect that is shooting upwards to the sky. So I'm gonna do set my sprite, instead of hero, change it to rocket. I'm gonna set the rocket acceleration y to negative 200. Okay, so let's see, if I press A, now my rocket's launched the sky. Okay, so that's how you can utilize the acceleration to give a different motion effect. And the next one that I want to show you is combine both the acceleration and velocity. So let's say I have a car that is speeding up, and I would like to slow it down as I press the B button, assuming B is the brake button. So how do we give that effect in the arcade? So let me clear out the on start block. Let me remove everything, and let me drag in a car sprite. Alright, so now I have a car sprite on my screen, and I'm gonna place it somewhere at the bottom of the screen. So let me just place it down here. Alright, and let's give it a speed. Let's say it's moving at an increasing speed, so acceleration moving to the right, so acceleration x, let's say 200. I think that will be really fast. Okay, so let's add a button control. Let's say if I press on B button and I want to slow the car down, what we can do is we change the speed of the car as we press the B button. So we drag in another set block into the on B button press and set car velocity, because we want to change the speed of the car, and we want to change the Vx, which is the horizontal speed, and let's say make it really slow, like 10. So let's see. So the car is moving at a fast speed. Let me refresh one more time, and the moment I press B, making that speed back down to 10. Let me change the speed maybe to something 100 so that we can see more. So car is speeding up, and as I press B, it will stop. It will kind of slow down the car. You might notice there's a small problem with the code, because I can only slow down the car when I press the B button. The moment I let go my B button, the car is speeding up again. Let me refresh. You can see the car is slowing down as I press B. The moment I let go, the car speed up again. Let me do that one more time. The moment I let go B, the car speed up again. So how do we change the code so that the car will stay slow after I press the B button? So the reason that the car actually get back to speed again after we release the B button is because we didn't change the acceleration of the car. At the onStart block, we asked the car to accelerate at 100. Although we say that, hey, change the speed to 10 when B button is pressed, but the acceleration is still 100. So which is why after we press the B button, the car speed is catching up again. So in order to slow down the car after I press the B button, we need to set the acceleration to 0, meaning don't speed up, just keep a constant speed at whatever that I have set. So let me duplicate this acceleration and place it after the velocity and change the acceleration to 0. So now the code says that once you click on the B button, set the velocity to 10 and don't increase the speed. Okay, let's try it out. Press B. So now you can see that my velocity is kept at 10 and it doesn't speed up, it's a constant speed. So now we managed to slow down the car. Let me do that one more time. Press B. Now we keep the car at a constant speed at 10. So we managed to slow down the car. And you might be asking, can I stop the car completely at the end? And the answer is yes, we can stop the car completely. What we need to do is to change the velocity to 0. And how are we going to make that effect that the car slow down first and then eventually it stops? So we can actually add a pause in between. So meaning that I will set the velocity to 10 and make sure that it doesn't accelerate anymore. And then after maybe 2 seconds, then set the velocity to 0, which is making the car to stop completely. So how do we wait 2 seconds? We can go to the loops drawer and look for a block say pause. Drag it into the on B button press and change 100 milliseconds to 2 seconds. So after 2 seconds, let's stop the car. So we will set the velocity of the car to 0. Okay, let's try it out. Let me refresh and stop. After 2 seconds, the car stopped. So we just created effect to stop a moving car. So let's combine what we have learned today to create a game. At the beginning of the session, we learned how to create button control, and then we also learned how to create different movement in our game. So I think we are ready to create a simple platformer game, which is a game that has a platform or the ground for the sprite to stand on. And then we can add in some button control and motions to control the character to move around the scene. So as you can see, this scene is looking from the front. So we are going to learn how to create a front view scene as well. So last week we learned about how to create a top-down view scene. Today we are going to learn how to create a front view scene. So going back to the MakeCode Arcade, and I'm going to create a new project and say my first platformer game. Hit create. Okay, so let's go ahead and create your first character. Go to Sprite and select an image for your sprite. I'm going to select a warrior. Let's go with this one here. I'm gonna change it a little bit. Let me change the shirts from red to blue, and maybe I can add a pen for it, a blue pen. Let me keep this guy in black and hit done. And I'm gonna rename my sprite to hero. Okay, so now in my screen I have a sprite that's in blue shirts and blue pen. Now let's go ahead and create a front view scene. So last week we learned that all the scene or background is created under the scene drawer. So we learned how to create background image last week, and we also learned how to create a top-down view scene using the set tile map. So for this week we are going to use the same block, set tile map. So drag it into the onStart block and click on the tile map. So looking at this tile map, you might be wondering, how are we going to draw on this square canvas here? So let's say if I want to draw a dungeon, let me pick up some bricks. Let's say this one. So if I want to lay a ground for my scene, should I lay it here or should I lay it down here? So how do we draw a platformer scene using this canvas here? So let me go back to the slides real quick. Our arcade screen size is 160 pixel wide and 120 pixel high. So this is the screen that we are looking at as we are playing on our arcade. And each of this tile that we have in our tile map is at 16 pixel wide and 16 pixel high. So that means in order to lay the tile on this screen, let's say if I want to lay it out over here, I'm going to need 1 tile, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 tile to fully fill up the screen. Because the screen is 160 pixels wide and each of this tile is 16 pixel wide, so it's gonna need 10 of them to fill up the screen from left to right. And then from top to bottom, you're gonna need 1 tile, 2 tile, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7.5. So you're gonna need 7.5 tiles, and because we can't draw half a tile, so we are gonna utilize 8 tiles to fill up the screen from top to bottom. So in order for us to draw up a scene for our game, we are gonna need 8 tiles from top to bottom and then 10 tiles from left to right. So go back to our canvas. So let me change the width of this canvas to 10 and the height of the canvas to 8. Okay, so this should be similar to the screen size that we have on our arcade. So let me try to lay a brick at the bottom layer here and also at the top layer here. Okay, and then hit done. So you have bricks at the top and at the bottom here. And I can't move my sprite yet, so let me drag in a controller and say move my sprite with buttons and change my sprite to hero. And as I move my hero, you can see that it stops right here. So if I want a scene that is really long, like you can keep walking forwards, I need a longer scene. So I'm going back to my tile map. So instead of just 10 wide, let me make it longer, like 30. And now I have a longer map. Let me use the pen tool to pen it down here. Alright, so today I'm gonna create a dungeon field map. So to create a dungeon, I'm gonna utilize these bricks, and let me erase those at the bottom because I'm gonna change the bottom layer to be a layer of lava. So let me erase them. And let me lay down some brick first. So I'm going to choose the same brick and let me lay it over here instead, and then maybe skip a fill. So it will create a gap in between for my sprite to jump across. And at the very end, I'm gonna place a treasure box. So here we go. Let me put it here. And then to give it a complete dungeon feel, let me fill out the top over here with a layer of brick as well. I'm going to use the line tool to help me to draw a straight line here. Okay, so at the bottom layer here, I still need to put some lava. So I can draw my own lava. Go to my tiles and add my tile. I'm gonna fill this tile red color. Let me draw some pattern for it. Alright, so let me use the line tool once again. I'm gonna use the lava and just fill up the bottom layer here. Oh yeah, don't forget to add an entrance as well. So I'm gonna go back to my gallery and I'm gonna place a door-like tile. I'm gonna put it here. So this is when my character is gonna appear in the game, and the goal is to reach to the end to collect the treasure. Alright, so I'm done with my map. I'm gonna hit done. Alright, so now my character is floating in the middle of the air. So let's apply what we learned earlier on to create a gravity for the game. So we're gonna set the acceleration for my sprite so that it will get pulled down to the ground. So go to Sprite, select Set My Sprite, set Hero, Acceleration, Y, to a positive value. To make a gravity field, we're gonna put a big number like 200. And now we can see that my sprite is falling down, so there's a gravity pull. But you notice there's a problem with my tile map. There's no wall on the map, so which is why the character fall right through the brick. So we need to create wall for the map. Go back to the tile map, choose draw walls, and let's draw walls on the bricks that you want to set as a platform or the ground. So these are the wall, and this one as well, and also the one on top. You can utilize the line tool to draw one straight line. Okay, so I have identified all the wall for my bricks or my tiles, and hit done again. Alright, so now my character can stand on the brick or the ground. Okay, and kind of, if you hit up, it can kind of going up, but because of the gravity, it's pulling it down again. Alright, and as you notice, now I'm using my directional button. When I hit A, it doesn't jump. So let us change the button control a little bit. Instead of clicking up to jump, we want to change it to click A to jump. So that way it's easier to navigate as you play the game. First thing, we need to say click on A and make it jump. We are going to go to controller and say on A button press. We are going to set it with a velocity going upward. So that will be Vy with a negative value. So let's say we put it 100. My sprite is having an error here because it's not supposed to be my sprite, it's supposed to be hero. So let's change it to hero. So let's click A. Now my character is jumping. And up is still working, so let's disable that. So click on the cross here and disable Vy. Now right now it's 100, so disable it and make it 0 so that the button will not be able to control the Vy, the velocity in Y-axis. So if I hit up, it won't go up anymore. but the V-axis is still working at 100. So I can control moving forward and backward. And at the same time, if I click on the A button, I can jump. Okay. And then we also need to make sure the camera is following the sprite so that the whole screen will move along your sprite. So go to Scene and choose Camera Follow Sprite. Put it inside the OnStart block and select Hero. So now you have a simple platformer game which you can control the sprite to move around the platform that you have created. You can use the A button to jump, and you can use the left right button to navigate the sprite to move forward and backward. And now we need to add a few more things. We need to end the game when it touches the treasure box, and also we want it to game over if it touches the lava at the bottom over here. So in order to do that, we are going to utilize the on block and say that when the player touches the treasure box, game win. When the sprite touches the lava, game over. So to do that is under Scene Drawer, find the on block. Here we go. On sprite of kind player overlaps, drag it to the empty space, let's say here. And the first one is a treasure box, so I'm gonna choose a treasure box. So when player touches treasure box, game over. It's gonna be win. And then I'm gonna duplicate the second one and say if it touches the lava, the game will lose. So if I fall into the lava, the game's over. And let's try to reach to the end. Let's see if I can make it this time. There you go. Now I win the game. Alright, and one more thing before we end this game. You can see that whenever I refresh the game, it's appear over here. So let's change how your sprite appear on the game. Let's change it to this little door here. So I'm gonna place my sprite in this tile when we start the game. So go to Scene Drawer once again and choose the block that say place my sprite on top of random. Drag that and put it inside on start. So on start, place my hero in this tile. So now you can see that when the game begins, my sprites appear at the door over here. Alright, so we have created a very simple platform game that has a front view scene, and we also incorporate what we learned today, which is the motion and also button control. So before we end today's session, let's do a quick recap of what we learned. So first thing, do you remember how do you instruct the computer to react when you press a button? We utilize the on block, which looks like this. We say on A button, repeat, or on button press, does something. So on block is utilized whenever you need to ask the computer to react when you press a button. How do you create motion for your objects? We utilize the velocity and acceleration attribute to create the movement for our objects. And do you remember how do you create an effect of gravity? To create an effect of gravity, we set the acceleration y to a positive value. And how do you make a rocket to shoot out to the sky? We set the acceleration y to a negative value. How do you make a car to move forward to the right? We set the acceleration x to a positive value. Alright, so that's all for today, and we would like to encourage you to build your own, because you have already learned the basics of sprites, the background, the button control, and motion. So you can practice your skill set by creating a simple game. I have a few examples here to show you. These are some games that you can create based on the knowledge that you have learned so far. The first one is collect the clovers. So you have a sprite character that going around to collect the food that's being created. And it has a pretty nice background as well. And then the second one is a basket free throw. So the sprite player is throwing the basketball into the basket over here. Then the next one is a maze game. And the last one is a simple jumpy platform game, just like what we created today, but you can create a different version, just like this one here. It's a car that's jumping around the track and trying to avoid the spike. And if you need help along the process in creating these games, you can go over to arcade.makecode.com, because these are the examples from arcade.makecode.com. So if you go to MakeCode, under the tutorial sessions, you can see example, free throw, collect the clovers, maze. So these are the tutorials that has been created by Microsoft. So if you are not sure how to create this game, you can refer to them. And based on the knowledge that you have learned so far, you should be able to pick it up pretty quickly. So you have learned the basics. Now you can create simple game. But you can notice that probably it's only simple game. So how do you upgrade your coding skills so that you can create any game that you want? Maybe something that is more interactive or more challenging. Well, we need to learn more in order to do that. Next session, we will learn how to talk to our computer. So meaning that in chapter 5, we will talk more about programming concepts, and that will equip you with more knowledge in order to create more advanced game. And take note, next Sunday, the live stream session will start at 9 o'clock. As usual, you can always watch the replay after the live streams is over. And the reason we need to adjust the time is because we are having a remote workshop here in 𝐂𝐻𝐿𝐻𝐸. So we need to move the live stream next week earlier to 9 a.m. And also, next week is Diwali. We would like to wish all our Indian friends a very happy Deepavali. And for some of you who might be impacted by the pandemic, we hope that you still get to spend time with your family, either remotely or physically together. So I think that's all for today, and we will see you next week.